Hello, welcome. Today we're doing something a little bit different again. We're going to be looking at this graphic novel, which is one of the all-time highest, I think it was the highest at the time, the highest revenue-generating Kickstarter comic book. And it is Keanu Reeves' Brzrkr. Now, I didn't back this on Kickstarter. I've got this in my local comic shop. It was £13 and it doesn't have page numbers, but it looks like it's probably some of the region of about 80, maybe 100. Firstly, cover, really nice, definitely working your star. Keanu Reeves, not just his name, but his likeness being attached, generally is going to help something like this generate money. Which makes it a little bit surprising. I'm going to try and catch the light there and see if that'll show up. You can see that sort of has a sort of bobbly texture, and you can see the lines in the print as well. That's true of the first handful of pages, which are all credits, by the way. If you're wondering where your $1 million Kickstarter money went, it's right there. All sorts of administrative overheads, hangers-on, unnecessary people with their hands in the till. You can still see that same bobbly texture on the page. What's interesting about that is I have this, which is it's from the mid-90s, so we're talking about it's nearly 30 years old, 25 to 30 years ago. And you've got an equally dark page there. No bobbles, no lines. And this is Image, so it's not DC, it's not Marvel, so it must have been printed in a more cheap way than standard, but it's still come out better than this. This is £1.5 million that this generated. It's £13 worth of book. I think that's pretty poor. But it doesn't really detract from the story, because once you get into the story, you see the bobbles here, but you can't see them as much on this page. In fact, that looks really quite clean. Even if I try to catch it, I can still see lines in the page, but they're very, very hard to make out, whereas the bobbles just seem to be completely gone from the internal pages. You can see the art here is from Garney, colours by Bill Crabtree. I was going to say Ian. It's good. It's not great. I really like this background here, but there's nothing much going on there. And once we get into the book, you see it's like, okay, I don't know. When you kickstart, you raise a lot of money. You've got people that can really spend time. You're not under pressure. Is that art worthy of something that raised $1.5 million? I think it was. I'm going to show you what I mean. So now we're going back into my era of comic books, and particularly my market, which is the UK, and Judge Dredd, and the art that I'm looking at in Brzrkr looks like Mike McMahon's art to me. There it is. It's not bad art as far as it goes. Look at the sort of stature and face of Dredd there. This is not bad art for the time, but it isn't the best art. When you saw Mike McMahon in the credits, you knew that he was there because he worked faster, not because he worked better than somebody like Brian Bolland. There's Brian Bolland. I'll find you. See, there you actually have them on the same page. Brian Bolland, Mike McMahon. I don't know. I mean, obviously not everyone draws like Brian Bolland, but if I'm paying the sort of money that I'm paying for a comic book on Kickstarter, and I mean the basic tiers are likely to be about $25. If I'm paying that for a book, then I think that it really should be the absolute best that it can be. And one of the reasons why I've got this is because it's art to bear. If I'm picking up an American comic book, then that's the sort of art that I expect, that sort of standard. There's Garney. Like I say, it's not terrible, but look at it. I mean, there's no detailing in the face here. This is still quite a large picture. And then we've got down here a guy's head being exploded by a punch and a flying eyeball. This is something that happens like 3 or 4 times in the text. It's effective because, it shows just the pure violence of this character, that he is genuinely berserk rather than just fighting. But do you need that more than once? What impact does it have the second or the third time? So there you go. I mean, again, nice image here really captures like the pure aggression, that animal nature of it. But then you've got a jaw being broken off here. There's plenty of gore. The guy's head being crushed by a boot, but the jaw being broken off. Jaw being broken off. How many times do you need to see the same thing? We're still in the first half dozen pages here. So what happens is we get this sort of modern day working for the government, hired killer sort of story with sort of these text bubbles of somebody having like a visit to the psychiatrist being dubbed over the images, if you like, if you want to talk about it like it's a film. There's a standard that's been set for that. I want to say Alan Grant, might be Alan Moore, but it's Button Man. Did this better than anybody else has done it. It does it better than this book does it. And when you get to the end, the psychiatrist character visits the Brzrkr character and says, I need to tell you something about the government. It's not what you think it is. And it feels like you're about 7% of the way through the story, but I've paid £13 for this. So the worry would be that if you think, right, well, I need to do this in 3 graphic novels, then are the next 2 parts going to rush through what should be a long story? Or is this going to be dragged out across like 10 of these issues and cost you well over £150 all done? Because if it's going to cost me £150, this art, there's a scene here where a plane explodes. This art is not art that I would pay £150 for. But the story's fairly interesting. It goes from the modern day, it flashes back to the Brzrkr telling his story about how he was, he's telling it to a psychiatrist here, or it looks like a psychiatrist, but she's obviously a government employee. And then it cuts back to like a primitive time, like 80,000 years before, and his mum does a ritual to sort of summon help from the gods to protect them when they're being attacked, and he is the protection that they get. But unfortunately his father decides that he's going to use him as a weapon for attack rather than defence, and the Brzrkr gets to the point where he's like, I don't want to die, but I want to be able to die. For me it seems like that there was a need to strike while the iron was hot. They raised all this money, there was a bit of buzz, they needed to get the book out, and they'd gone with Mike McMahon. Not literally, obviously, but that's the metaphor really, is they've gone for the artist who's decent, who's good, and gets the job done and gets it done quick, so it's out there while there's still that buzz. When they should have gone for somebody more like Brian Bolland, Dale Keanu, and made this absolutely epic. Because it just isn't. But then the story isn't either. It's all a little bit, seen this before, this has been done before. It's just the gore that's been dialed up to 11. Other than that, it would just be Button Man. It would just be something along those lines that we've all seen before. That said, the frenzied nature of the violence does work. The character then becomes somebody that you're intrigued by rather than interested in. And that's important because you're not going to empathise. So the problem being is that this raised so much money, there was so much hype, but really it's that sort of good but not great bracket. And I wouldn't buy any more of these until I was sure how many there were going to be. Because if it turned out that there was, like The Walking Dead, like 100 of them and still ongoing, then I definitely don't want any part of it because it's just not good enough. But if there was 3, I would think that the story has been rushed from the kind of pedestrian pace of it here, and then I probably wouldn't buy that either. So they have to be really careful where they go with it from there. Anyway, I don't usually talk about comic books here, but that is kind of a big deal, and with the Rippaverse generating all that money, sort of comic books have been in the public sphere, if you like. So I just thought I would have a look at this one, the previous record holder for most money generated by a Kickstarted comic book. I won't be reviewing the Rippaverse one, unfortunately, because the postage and packaging just to the UK alone is like $45, so that's just a non-starter really. But while we're here looking at books, I'm going to show you mine. Now these are only test prints. I had them sent to the printer just to see what sort of standard they could do. There's the paperback there. Again, this is not the cover that it's going to come with, and just in case you're new to the channel, you're just here for the Brzrkr review, this is not a comic book, it's just a book. Just a book. So that was the paperback one. It came out okay, there's slightly low print and the glue's not great on the spine. So that's the paperback, and I'm not overly impressed with them, so I don't think I'll go back to that printer. So we're looking at two different hardback versions. You see I had this one done with a matte finish and it comes up really nice, whereas this glossy one, if I can try and catch a bit of light with it, when it catches the light you can see there's quite a few imperfections in it. However, internally it really is great. Just really looking the part now. So I really like this one. I really like the way that's come out with a matte finish. If I can get this style, because you see the size difference. The smaller one is probably a better size for a novel. This is more of a standard document size, is A5. Probably in terms of the cover I preferred the matte finish, but I likely will go for the gloss because this was slightly cheaper than that one, and I want to make it available to you at the lowest price point that I can. Where we stand with it is the text is finished. There's proofreading still happening. There's a couple of test readers still to get back to me. I'm hoping that they'll do that. And in the meantime, given that we've been talking about comic book art, I'm really looking for an artist to do the cover. I did these. They're not to the standard that I want. I want a professional artist to do the cover. So if you know anybody, give them my contact information. This is paid work, and there will be a pinned comment with my contact details in it. So if you know anybody who's a comic book artist of a decent standard, please get them in touch with me. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Hopefully the Brzrkr review was something you found interesting. If you want me to do more comic books, then I will, but it will be sporadic. They're not something that I'm into as much as I am sort of more traditional written novels. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Stay tuned to the channel for more information about Sexton Lovecraft. That's my book. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.